Well, Emma, let's shift gears here and talk about